Good evening and welcome to this forum for, welcome to this forum for Clarkston School Board for the November 4th, 2014 election. Today is October 16th, 2014. This forum will be featuring those persons who have filed for the Clarkston School Board. There are 5 candidates. Vote for 3 for a 6-year term. Sponsor of this forum are the League of Women Voters and the Clarkston PTA Council. I am Jerry Burden, a member of the League of Women Voters. I'm not a resident of this district. The League of Women Voters is a trusted, national, nonpartisan political organization. Our members do the hands-on work to safeguard democracy. While we never endorse a candidate or political party, we are directly involved in shaping the important issues that keeps our community strong. As a League of Women Voters member, I have the opportunity to contribute in a leadership role such as this that has great impact on local, state, and national issues. If you're interested in learning about how you can become a similar impact, I would encourage you to pick up Register from the League or information available here tonight, or visit our website at lwvoa.org. The League of Women Voters do not endorse any candidate or political party. Views expressed in this forum are those of the candidates, and the sponsors take no responsibility. The format for this forum has been established by the League of Women Voters. We ask the audience remain silent during the forum. Please turn off all cell phones. We ask the candidates answer the question with their views only and not to interrupt the other candidates. The candidates will be answering questions submitted by the audience and screened for duplication and appropriateness by John McGarry, a League member. Pages will be circulating with papers and pencils for your questions. Please turn your questions into the page. If you don't have a card, raise your hand and they'll get you a card to write your question. All candidates will be given 1-minute opening statements in alphabetical order. Closing statements will be 1 minute in reverse order. Candidates will have 1 minute to answer each question in rotation unless extended by the moderator. The candidates will be allowed equal time to answer questions. Our timer is down front. He will indicate to the candidates when there's 30 seconds, 15 seconds, and time to stop. The candidates are Donald E. Deering, Elizabeth Egan, Kelly Horst, Steve Heyer, and Rosalie Liebling. We begin a 1-minute opening statement with Mr. Deering.
First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for coming this evening. My name is Donald Deering, and I am here running for the school board simply for the transparent reason, I hope, that my children, 6 and 7, attend Bailey Lake Elementary, where I was just at for our teacher-parent conferences, and both had a great review, so I was happy with that. And so I would like to really do my part, whatever that is, to try to communicate effectively with the community that I live, to try and shape the school board, administration, teachers, students alike. I plan on living in this community for a long time, so my goals are, I think, pretty straightforward in that respect. But the main thing that I would like to do is think about budget, think about technology, and most importantly, think about communication.
Thank you. Ms. Egan.
Good evening, and good evening.
I think
My mic is on.
It's on.
Are you sure? It's not very loud. Can you hear me?
There we
Okay,
go.
good. There we go. Good evening. I'd like to thank everyone for taking this time out of your busy evening to come and be with us tonight and hear the candidates speak. And thank you, League of Women Voters and PTA Council, for putting this event on. My name is Elizabeth Egan. I'm currently serving on your school board as a trustee. I have been serving on the Teaching and Learning Council, the Reinstatement Committee, Finance Committee. I've chaired policy. I was also vice president for 2 years. I am a master member board member for MASB. I have served as PTA president at the high school, junior high, vice president at Sashabaw Middle School, and reflections chair. And I have 2 daughters that graduated from high school. I'm married. I've been in Clarkston 18 years. I am a piano teacher. I've been teaching for 14 years. I am the only teacher on the school board, and I love teaching kids. And I believe that great schools make a great community. And our schools need to mirror our community, and relationships matter. Every student counts in Clarkston, and I'm looking forward to serving again on your school board.
Thank you, Ms. Horst.
So I'm just going to start with the elephant in the room. Which side am I on? The 3 or the 4? Am I for Dr. Rock or against Dr. Rock? That has no place here. School board members should want the superintendent to be successful because if he is, our kids will be. They should want to respect and reward our teachers and our school employees because they're essential to learning. They should value a culture of thinking because everything our students are going to encounter when they leave Clarkston schools does. If the school board was operating effectively, I wouldn't run. It's pretty tough to beat an incumbent. But I don't see the Clarkston I know at the board table. We need the voice of a current parent who's navigating the transition to the upper grades and one who represents the positive values and aspirations of our community. I've worked with parents, teachers, administrators at all levels as a PTA leader, so I know what's needed in our schools. I also know what our students are going to face after they graduate because I've worked with colleges and universities for the last 15 years. So by the end of this forum tonight, you're going to know exactly what side I'm on, and it's yours. Thank you.
Mr. Heyer.
My name is Steve Heyer. I'm currently serving in my 14th year on the Clarkston School Board. I would first like to thank the League of Women Voters and PTA Council for sponsoring tonight's event. I was first elected in 2001, and I'm just completing my 3rd term. I've lived in Clarkston for 22 years. I graduated from Clarkston High School in 1997 and the University of Michigan in 2000. I've been married for 10 years today, actually, to my wonderful wife, Kelly, who allows me to devote a considerable amount of time to the school board. And I'm very proud this is the first time I'm running that I can talk about my 2 wonderful children, Stephen, who's 4, and Vivian, who's almost 2. I currently work as president of IGD Solutions Corporation, and in that capacity, I've served as president of the Clarkston Area Chamber of Commerce and the Clarkston Local Business Network. As a school board member, I can tell you that student achievement is the most important thing we deal with. Unfortunately, sometimes this board can get bogged down in the day-to-day operations of the district. I will work to return our focus at the board table to increasing student achievement. I look forward to telling you more about myself and my plans for the next 6 years on the Clarkston School Board tonight.
Thank you. Ms. LeBlanc.
Hello, my name is Rosalie Liebling, and I would also like to thank everyone for coming and the League of Women Voters and the PTA Council for sponsoring this event. I have served on the school board for the last 5 years. During that time, I have served on the Transportation, Reinstatement, Teaching and Learning Committees, and have also served as the chair for the Finance and Policy Committees. I've been the board secretary, the treasurer, and I'm currently the board president. I'm a certified board member, and I continue my professional development through events sponsored by Michigan Association of School Board. I began volunteering in the schools when my oldest daughter started kindergarten in 2006. Since then, I have served in many capacities, including being a PTA volunteer, a room parent, the Bailey Lake PTA president for several years, served on the PTA council as a treasurer, and I've also served as an individual mentor for students at Sashaba and the high school and the junior high. I'm running for re-election because education is one of the most important things we can provide for our children. Being involved as a parent, volunteer, and member of the school board is a way I can give back and serve the community, which is something I strongly believe in. My goal in being re-elected to the Clarkston School Board is to ensure we provide the best educational opportunities and experiences for our students so they can be as successful and achieve their dreams, whatever they may be.
Thank you. Now is the time for questions from the audience, and we'll start with Mr. Deering. In any state K-12 school budget, how do you believe brick and mortar public schools should have funding precedence over charter schools, cyber schools, and other non-public institutions?
Well, being new to this issue, I can only speak to my experience with regard to being in industry for the last 17 years. I'm a trained counselor and psychologist, business owner. I've employed many a staff in my day, and I've certainly had many of offices that I've had to fund personally, so I understand some of the difficulties with regard to financing in that regard. Although I don't think I can specifically speak to the issues related to what would be more important with regard to funding for brick and mortar versus charter school, potential income, so on and so forth. My goal is, again, as I can be as transparent as possible, is to look at the issues, listen to the people, try to understand, given my background and experience, what it is that people want, and try to be the voice for those individuals. And whatever that happens to be, if it's the majority or it makes sense and it's logical to me, then I would support that issue. So I apologize, I can't give you the specific answer to that. That's the best I can do right now.
Thank you, Ms. Egan.
Well, I believe that all kids in America deserve a free and equal education, and that's one of the major benefits of funding public education. Every child that crosses our threshold is entitled and receives, certainly here in Clarkston, I think a wonderful opportunity to be the best that they can be. There is the issue with charter schools funding, and is it fair? It's a lot less expensive to educate a younger child K through 8 than it is a high school, and the same funding, the state foundation is the same for charter schools as the lowest foundation level it is for our public schools, but the public schools have a higher level of accountability than charter schools do. They are not nearly as transparent. They are also sometimes run by for-profit organizations. Their administrative costs are higher and they pay their teachers less. So I'm for transparency, and I am for funding all schools equally, and but I do favor funding for public schools right now because we're regulated and we're held more accountable, we're held to higher standards than charter schools are.
Thank you, Ms. Horst.
Thank you. All we really need is a level playing field. I'd put Clarkston Community Schools up against any charter school, any cyber school, any school in the state of Michigan. But without that level playing field, it's awfully hard to compete against these other types of schools, as Ms. Egan said, when they aren't held to the same accountability standards that we are. I'm not thrilled that a lot of our tax dollars can go to schools that are run by for-profit organizations. So what can we do about it? Well, I think you need your members of your Board of Education to be champions, not only for Clarkston Community Schools, but for public education in general. And that's really the best role that we can play, is to continue to talk to our legislators about what's fair, about what's equitable, and remind them what we do is vital in our community.
Thank you, Mr. Heyer.
The School Aid Fund was established in 1994 as part of Proposal A. It's really dedicated toward K-12 funding, but recently it's been rated a number of times for community colleges, higher education. It's bailed out the general fund on at least one occasion. Clarkston Community Schools, as a result of the last few years, is now the lowest funded district in the state at $7,251 per kid. I find this to be unacceptable, and I think we must do more in the way of advocacy toward our state. The state is constitutionally required to provide funding for public education. As the state provides money on a per pupil basis, it certainly makes no sense to provide the same amount of money on a per pupil basis to a cyber school than it does a public school academy or a traditional public school. Certainly there has to be some equity there in both requirements as well as the way the funding is divvied out. I would put any of our students up against a student from a public school academy or a charter or a cyber school any day of the week, and I'm confident that our students would perform better or equal to any of those other students.
Thank you, Ms. LeBlanc.
I think we have great schools in Clarkston. We are one of the lowest funded districts, and I think our administration and our teachers and our staff do a phenomenal job with the amount of money that we receive, being the lowest funded district. I do think we need to lobby our legislature to really provide the right funding for public schools. The majority of children do go through the public schools. So, should we have the same funding for public schools versus for-profit? I would agree. I think public education is something that is required by the Constitution of each of the states, and just ensuring that we continue to talk to our legislators and advocate for more public school funding, I think, is very important.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Ms. Egan. A political party has stated they have increased money for education, and other political party says money for education has decreased. Has the allocation of money to the schools increased or decreased in the past years? And explain.
Well, it's relative to each district because all districts are not funded equally here in the state of Michigan. After Proposal A, the intent was to make the gap between higher funded schools and lower funded schools less, to close that gap and be more equitable. So what we're finding is that we've achieved some of that, but not all of that. And in terms of is funding up or down, it depends on how you look at it. The actual funding coming into the student aid fund is higher this year, and Clarkston is actually getting an increase. We are going from about $7,552 per pupil from 2010, and this year we will have $7,251. So it's down over the last 4 years, but in terms of over the last 3 years, it's up a little bit. But in terms of our costs, the state has increased our percentage that we have to pay as a percent of payroll into the Michigan Public Schools retirement system. When I started on the board, it was 17% of payroll, and it's currently this year 33%. So even though the funding is up a little bit, the cost to pay into the pension system is higher.
Thank you. Ms. Horst.
So I think the simple answer is yes. It's gone up, it's gone down, they've pulled money out, they've put money in, but certainly the reality is a lot more complicated than that. Overall, in Clarkston schools, we're putting less money into the classroom for some of the reasons that have been mentioned: retirement costs, the way they keep taking money out of the school aid fund and giving it to early childhood education, which you can't really argue with. Research tells us how important that is, but also higher education. And as someone who works in higher education, there's a piece of me that says, yay, but really, K-12 is the foundation. I mean, you aren't going to be successful in higher education if you don't have that good foundation here. I remember several years ago when they cut the per pupil funding by about $400, and we lobbied our legislators at the time, again, to be fair and equitable. We said we get less money. A $400 cut here hurts a heck of a lot more than it does in some of our neighboring districts where they get $10,000 and $12,000 per pupil. So again, continuing to try to come up with some solutions, and we asked at the time for a percentage cut, not an across the board cut. Clearly that didn't go over well, but we have to continue to be that voice.
Thank you. Mr. Heyer.
The state has certainly spent more money on education over the last 4 years. However, almost all of the increases have gone to the state retirement system. We receive $301 less per student now than we did in 2009 and 2010. For us, that's $2.4 million less that we're receiving now than just 4 years ago. In my 14 years on the board, we've seen a 21% increase in the cost of retirement and only a 12% increase in our revenue. That's a structural deficit that we have to deal with. Locally, we've been very proactive in dealing with this. We've noticed the issue on the horizon, we've reacted early, and we've done innovative things like providing teachers to private parochial schools to provide non-core classes. That provides over $1 million annually to us that we can use to balance our budget, to balance our general fund, to provide our opportunities for our kids here in Clarkston. So as long as we keep our eye on the ball and we continue to plan proactively for these things, as long as we continue to innovate locally with school of choice programs like CSM Tech and International Baccalaureate Program, the Advanced Studies Program that bring kids in from other districts, we will continue to be successful.
Thank you. Ms. Liebling.
The state has put more money into education over the past several years. However, it has been allocated to other organizations, not just the public schools. So overall, for Clarkston, we have seen a decrease over the past several years. Our costs have gone up. We are one of the lowest funded districts, and the state has also put some of the money in performance and incentives, some of which we were able to achieve and some of which we aren't able to participate in, just given our structure, our ability to share services, our ability to outsource, those kinds of things. So overall, it is gone down, and again, we need to continue to lobby our legislature to make sure that we get the right amount of funding to deliver the best education we can for our students so that they can be successful in the future.
Thank you. Mr. Deering.
Well, in my cursory review of the documents for the past few years, it appears pretty clearly that the revenue coming into the schools is down, and yet despite that, my experiences as being a parent in the community, it appears as though services are up, and teachers, as I saw this evening, are seemingly doing a solid job. Obviously, they need to have more resources to do that. And so I guess I look at this issue real plainly as two simple factors. One is, just like the private sector, we are going to be forced to do more with less, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. So that means we have to try and figure out how it is that we can do more with less resources in the short term, which I think requires significant communication among the people, all of us, to get that done, while long-term trying to figure out how it is that we can meet everyone's needs and wants. And that's a very difficult challenge, I understand, but I believe it's very doable as well.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Ms. Horst. Do you think the status of the current technology in the Clarkson schools available for staff and students is adequate?
If it was 1985, maybe. This is clearly one of the greatest physical plant challenges we have in our district. We've been tackling it for years. We talked about it a couple of years ago. I have a student in the middle school and in the junior high, and I'm pretty sure the computers are older than they are. We don't need fancy tools just to have fancy tools. But there's really two aspects here. One, it enhances learning, and I think in the pilots that we've seen in our schools in the last couple of years, it engages students in a new way that's reflective of the society and the culture that they're going to enter. But also, we are a large organization. We're the largest employer in Clarkston. We need to be technologically efficient just to run. And there are business processes, there are decisions that are delayed. There's a lot that's delayed because our technology is out of date. I know there's no easy answer to this, but my goodness, guys, we've got to make some decisions and at least get into the 90s.
Thank you, Mr. Heyer.
Our technology infrastructure is severely dated. The main part of our technology infrastructure and our end user computers were purchased with money from the 2003 bond issue. That was 11 years ago that revenue came into the district. I believe we spent the last of it about 6 years ago. Technology, along with our teachers and physical plants maintenance needs, is the #1 priority for spending in our district. We must come up with a way to take care of these critical needs. Certainly, we don't need to go through an exhaustive technology planning process just to realize we need to replace our core network switches and core network elements and put Wi-Fi into our schools to enable learning on bring your own device. These are things that are obvious that we should be moving forward on, and we should not be getting bogged down in the day-to-day operations of the technology planning to hold up these kinds of purchases. We have to put kids first, we have to put our classrooms first, and making decisions is sometimes more critical than planning out the next 5 years.
Thank you, Ms. LeBlanc, and I'd like to remind the audience, please remain silent until the end. We want to hear the candidates, not the audience. Ms. LeBlanc.
Thank you. Technology plays such an important role in all of our lives. We want our students to be well prepared and to know how to leverage technology to further their learning. The status of our technology is certainly not adequate, and I think we all know it on the board, and I think the members of the community and the students and the teachers know it as well. But we really do have to find a way to plan what our technology spend is. When you need to replace everything and you don't have the budget, you do have to have a plan to go forward to really understand what can we afford this year, what can we afford next year. Teachers are one of our most important assets, and so we definitely want to make sure that we're spending the balance of our budget focused on our teachers and so that they can focus on educating our students. Technology is certainly an enabler of that, and it's something we need to look at, and we are creating a technology plan so that, and to be able to find some funding mechanisms so that we can have a certain amount of technology spend every year and get ourselves caught up to date.
Thank you, Mr. Deering.
Well, in preparation for running for the school board, I took it upon myself to reach out and interview a bunch of teachers. And I expected a different answer than I got when I said, if you could have anything in the world for your class or your position as a teacher, what would it be? Of course, my thought would be, it'd be nice to have more money in my pocket, and maybe that would have been a close second, but the #1 answer was, I'd like to have a computer that takes less than 15 minutes to boot up in the morning. And so I'm guessing that that's a pretty clear issue for all of us, and I hear what most of the board members or candidates are saying, And I'd have to agree in that, obviously, we have very few resources to work with. You still have to have a plan. But I think that if you could come up with a plan to be able to get some things done on short order, that would certainly make a significant difference. And if it were me, and just me, which I realize it's not, that would be one of the top 3 priorities that I would certainly be wanting to push for, and I would want to do that pretty immediately.
Thank you. Ms. Egan.
Well, I would say, is our technology sufficient? I would say no to that answer. For instance, we are operating on a Microsoft Office suite of 2003 that is no longer supported by Microsoft, so we have no support for our software. If you look at our website, when our students turn in projects and homework, they are told that they have to make sure they save their documents, for instance, a Word document, in a .doc format, because our systems can't handle a .docx format. So our software that we're using with kids and homework, they have most kids, if they have a computer at home, and about 80% of our students do, the last time we inventoried that, they have a higher level or a later release of operating systems. We don't have Wi-Fi in our buildings, or it's very limited. We definitely need network switches. Our kids are creating projects with videos and larger files, and our data capacity on our current networks just simply is not sufficient.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Mr. Heyer. Michigan's version of the Common Core, called Smart Balance, were canceled in favor of the continuation of the MEP testing program at the legislature. Do you agree with this move, or do you want the Common Core Smart Balance to eventually supplement the MEP?
There's probably nothing out there currently in education that is less understood and more misrepresented than the Common Core state standards. The Common Core state standards are a set of standards that were come up by the National Governors Association. There's no research behind them. They're coming up in math and English language arts only. There's 2 areas. They're K-12 standards. Michigan has chosen to adopt them. In Clarkson, we've implemented them. They are in our classrooms. This is what we're using in math and English language arts. They're a baseline level. Locally, we can enhance those as we see fit. The Smarter Balance is just a testing component of that. So the Smarter Balance test is aligned to these Common Core state standards. I am not an expert in testing. I would support the Common Core in that it doesn't make sense to rip them out because they're in place currently. It would take a lot of money and be a disservice to kids if we did that. However, I'm not in favor of using a Common Core or any test to undermine public education and negatively label our students.
Thank you. Ms. Liebling.
I do believe that having standards for education nationally as well as through the state level is a good thing for all students, and certainly our ability to enhance them and create the standards that we want for Clarkston is our prerogative, and we would obviously create standards that work best for us. In terms of the testing, there always has to be some sort of test, I guess, whether it's the MEP or the Smarter Balanced. So I think if we can, when tests are created, as long as they're fair tests, they analyze aspects of what children know, and it's not always easy to do that in a standardized test. So I think having a standardized test is probably, it's hard to say you aren't going to have those things, but I think we also need to find other ways to assess our students so it's fair to everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Deering.
Well, I would say with regard to standardized testing, this is something that I'm very familiar with. As a professor at Oakland University Department of Counseling, I can tell you that one of the things that irks me the most is you have to take a graduate record exam to get into our PhD program, even if you already have a master's degree from our very own department. That's one of the things that I'm actually changing, because the graduate record exam is to determine your probability of success in graduate school. If you have a master's degree, you probably don't need to take that test to get into a PhD program. My point in saying all that is sometimes standardized testing is a great thing, but sometimes there's no real good reason for the change. And so I would ask, what's the logical conclusion that we're trying to get at? Are we trying to come up with some measurable evidence that teachers are doing a great job? Maybe. If that's so, okay, let's talk about that. But I don't quite understand, and I haven't heard any real good rationale yet for why it is we'd consider making the change in this particular standardized testing approach. So I'm a little unclear as to why we'd make that change in the first place.
Thank you, Ms. Egan.
Well, originally, the Common Core was developed through a consortium of educators and the National Governors Association to create equity among across the states for all kids, regardless of where they lived, so that their teaching standards would be consistent. And that makes a lot of sense, especially when we have a lot of families moving around, and we don't want a child to move mid-year and then go to another school district and then be harmed because the other school district, whether it's in the state of Michigan or in another state, just it didn't align with what is being taught at the time. The real issue behind whether we take the Common Core, or I'm sorry, the Smarter Balanced Assessment versus the MEAP, it really boils down to, is there money for technology? The Smarter Balanced Assessment is designed to give almost half of the assessments online. We don't have the technology. Most school districts in the state of Michigan don't have the technology. We don't have the money to implement this so that we can test these students. We can't start testing kids in October and then take till April to test them. We know the kids in April will do much better under those circumstances. So it's really a funding issue at this point in time. I know the state is working on trying to come up with a retrofitted MEAP to align with the Common Core, but we've been investing in the Common Core for 4 years. The train has left the station. Most of our curriculum is lined up with the Common Core in Michigan in any case.
Ms. Horst.
Well, I think we could probably spend an entire hour talking about the pluses and minuses of standardized testing, but with relation to the Common Core and what they are hoping to implement now, let me say a couple of things. To me, the best news, no matter what the standards are or what the outcomes are that we're going to be held accountable to as a district, the best news is that we still retain local control over what we teach and how we teach to meet those standards. That's absolutely critical from my perspective. I think that we have higher standards here in Clarkston than any of these tests, any of these standardized tests would hold us to. So I'm not really concerned at all about our schools performing or not performing against any standardized test. The other thing that I really like about these kinds of standards and what I've seen of them is that they really align well with our cultures of thinking, which we want students to think more deeply, to focus on skills that are more valuable in the workplace, that are going to serve them well in college, that they're going to be able to synthesize, not just memorize. And any curriculum, any test that helps us work toward that is good.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Ms. Liebling. I'm going to give you 90 seconds, and it'll probably take longer than that. I have several questions. I'm going to try to paraphrase because they're all written different. We'll start out, do you support the superintendent's contract, and do you feel who should be running the district, the board or the superintendent?
Well, the board, everybody has a role in the district, and the board's role is to work with the administration to set the vision and the goals, and it is the superintendent's job to carry them out once they're agreed on. I think we've done a great job recently. We have created our strategic plan. I think we got some assistance from Dr. Joan Sargent, who is a consultant at Oakland Schools, and she really helped us develop a strategic plan that I think everyone on the board and the administration can look to see what are the kinds of things we want to try to achieve for our district. We're also working next on our annual plan, and that truly is what the board and the administration want to achieve for a particular year. So working through that process, I think, has been very good. I think we certainly have supported the administration. They have some great recommendations. And in answer to the superintendent's contract, yes, I do support the superintendent's contract.
Thank you. Mr. Deering.
Well, first, I'd like to actually admit that I've never to date actually met the current superintendent. I hope to do that this evening, as a matter of fact. But I will say that my understanding of the roles as we have them is, as a board, to oversee things like the budget, to oversee things such as administrative staff and personnel that are put in place to get the job done. But you have to empower the people to do that job. And so, from my perspective, I would absolutely be in favor of administration running the show, frankly. And I would want to be a role, I would want to have a role, I'd want to be present for that, I'd want to assist in that, and certainly to the extent required by law with regard to budgeting and whatnot, I'd want to be governed to some extent with regard to that board. But I don't believe, and certainly I hope it's not the job of the board, to be actively involved in the day-to-day operations for administration and how the schools are run. If that's the case, I'm not sure there's any of us up here that will have the time to actually make that happen. So I would like to think that we would be able to collaborate with administration, with the superintendent, hear what it is that needs to be done, support that in any way that's possible, be as transparent as possible, look at what the real restrictions are, the reality. I'm a big fan of reality therapy as a therapist myself. So I would like to be able to get that done in the context of, again, the needs and wants. And I think that can be done pretty collaboratively and hopefully pretty quickly.
Thank you. Ms. Egan.
The first part of the question is, do I support the superintendent's contract? Yes, I do. I think there's never a better vote of confidence than to support the superintendent's contract and make it at least 3 years. The revised school code says we can actually extend it up to 5 years if we wanted to. I think Dr. Rock is a rock star. He uses research-based learning. He's brought cultures of thinking, teaching protocols in the classroom. He is big on professional development for our teachers, and I have seen a staff of teachers very invigorated, just energized to teach our kids, very excited in the classroom because of what they are learning from him. And so I'm very supportive of Dr. Rock. I think he's very passionate about learning. The other part of the question, who runs the district? Dr. Rock runs the district. By the revised school code of 1976, it clearly states that the school board delegates its authority for the management and the day-to-day operations of the district. Our job as a school board, we set policy, we create budget parameters, we work as a team with the superintendent to develop the mission and the vision and the strategic plan for the district, and then we hire and coach and supervise the superintendent.
Thank you. Ms. Horst.
I think Dr. Rock is an extraordinary educational leader, and he's surrounded himself with very knowledgeable and very professional administrative team, and they are incredibly capable of running this district. The board needs only to represent the values and aspirations of our community and communicate those values and aspirations to Dr. Rock and the administrative team. That's the kind of partnership we should have. If after November 4th, this board does not provide more support and more respect to Dr. Rock and the administrative team, we'll lose him.
Thank you, Mr. Heyer.
I absolutely support the superintendent contract. I pushed very hard this past year to make sure we renewed the superintendent contract so it stayed at least 3 years. Anything less than 3 years, I believe, is a signal from the board that we do not support the superintendent. I think that undermines his authority to run the district. I think it's unfair, and it's not the way to run a district. Dr. Rock has been an inspiration to our staff members. He's been an inspiration to staff members in other districts as well. He has connected us with educational researchers like Howard Gardner, Ron Richard, people that are the absolute leading experts in the industry in brain research and educational research that work out of Harvard and other prestigious research institutions when it comes to education. Our staff members and faculties have access to these people on an ongoing basis. They can connect, ask questions, collaborate, and that has directly, positively affected our student achievement. Certainly nobody's perfect, everybody can improve, and unfortunately in the environment that we're in with this school board, we only have one employee, and we can't work on a lot of the big picture items that we could to improve as a board superintendent team, because we are getting down into, we have approved a strategic plan. Next, we're going to be asked to approve objectives under that strategic plan, and I would call a lot of those job goals. And it's certainly not my job as a school board member to approve job goals for the central office administrators. The school board is made up of 7 volunteers from the community with no specialized training. We hire a superintendent, we hire administrators that are degreed experts when it comes to delivering public education. We should listen to their recommendations, make sure they're appropriate for our community, and support them so our kids win.
Thank you. Next question will start, Mr. Deering. Are you in favor of the school bond? Did you support the last school bond? And do you believe we receive fair state funding?
Well, I have to admit that I have, again, limited knowledge on that. I'm not sure that I was even in this district the last time that was an issue here. So what I would say to that is that if the school bond was in favor of us getting due or adequate resources as defined by what teachers tell us they need in the classroom to deliver an education that's world-class, that's why I moved here, frankly. I'm fortunate in that I could have moved anywhere in this state. And I chose to move to Clarkston because they have simply some of the best schools, and I want my boys to be taught by the best. And so with regard to supporting the bond, if the bond supports the teachers to get the job done so I can have my children raised with a world-class education, then absolutely I would be in support of that. If for some reason that's not the case, it would be very difficult to persuade me in any other way, because I am absolutely pro-teacher. I am a teacher. Doctor means teacher, frankly, and that's something I've spent my career trying to do, to be effective teachers, to be an effective teacher, to support teachers. So if that is in fact what the details, and the devil's always in the details, if that is in fact what that will allow us to do, then I would be in support of it. If not, then I wouldn't, just that simple.
Thank you, Ms. Egan.
Could I ask you to repeat the question one more time?
Are you in favor of the school bond? Did you support the last school bond? Do you believe we received fair state funding?
Okay, state funding, thank you. Okay. Yes, I was in support of the last school bond, and I think it shows today the result of the no vote. Now, I accept the voice of the voters. When you're sitting here on the school board, the first thing you're really voting on is, are you going to give the public the right to say yes or no? So I voted yes, because I think that is a public decision, and we had the responsibility to put that in front of the voters. In terms of, and of course, you always have a little bit more privilege of information when you're sitting on the school board and you see the detail of the operations in the district. We need new networks. We just upgraded a firewall, but we need software upgrades. We need new computing equipment. And the bond was not just about technology. That last bond was also about building maintenance and repairs. And we are in a reactive mode right now for maintaining our buildings in some cases. In terms of state funding, this school year, Clarkston will receive $7,251 per pupil in our state allowance. Surrounding districts around us, Lake Orion, is over 7,800, Rochester over 7,900, Troy is over 8,800. I don't think that's fair. The cost of living is not that different here in Clarkston. It's higher in Waterford. So do I think it's fair? No. I think Clarkston is at the state minimum, and I've been working to advocate with our legislators to help fix that.
Thank you. Ms. Horst.
I did support the school bond in 2012. What a process that was. It was very enlightening for me as a parent in our district, as a voter, as a taxpayer, to go through a process that I think started from the beginning as a divisive one. And unfortunately, as many of you in this room remember, it became more divisive as it went on up until Election Day and really even beyond. I think there were some very good lessons to learn coming out of that. One is that maybe 2 years later, we're realizing that a lot of the items that were listed as critical needs in that bond remain critical needs today, and we haven't made a lot of progress addressing those needs. So I don't think anything in that bond was, it was outrageous to ask for. But another lesson learned, I think, is you can't go to the voters if the board is not going to be of like mind. And so if I understood the question, would I be in favor of another school bond, I think it would have to have an overwhelming majority of board support and board members who were willing to go out into the community and advocate for it instead of against it.
Thank you. Mr. Heyer.
We have technology needs that we've addressed tonight. We have physical plant and maintenance needs. And as a board, we need to be responsible and explore every possible funding solution for these. I would certainly be in favor of evaluating what a bond would look like. I would not support a bond at this time that raised our millage rate. The majority of the board voted last time to go forward with the last school bond, and as a board member, I supported the vote of the majority of the board, and I respect the decision of our voters. the state must provide us with inflationary increases in funding. There's no way for us to take care of our staff members, to take care of our teachers, which are the most critical element of delivering our educational program, without inflationary increases from the state above and beyond what the state forces us to pay into their retirement system. We must continue to advocate and lobby to our legislature to prioritize K-12 funding and put our kids ahead of other special interest groups.
Ms. Liebling.
I was not in favor of the last school bond. I think at that time, we had heard some conflicting information from some teachers and some other people in the administration. I think we were trying to do a one-size-fits-all. We were trying to say every child is going to get a certain type of equipment. Some teachers viewed the fact that they needed a different piece of equipment. And so it was not a one-size-fits-all. And I think we really needed to do a plan. We really needed to communicate to the voters, what can we do as a district? What can we fund? And then what are the gaps? And I think until we can clearly identify from a plan standpoint, here's what we can do and here's the limits of what we can do, I think it's difficult to ask the voters or to communicate to the voters that there really is a gap. So I'm looking forward to our technology plan. We've all agreed technology is a high-cost opportunity that we really need to take a look at, and the more funding we can get, whether it's from outside grants, foundations, we need to explore all opportunities we can to improve our technology.
Thank you. This will be the last question prior to the closing remarks, and we will start with Ms. Egan. And if re-elected, what are the two most pressing issues before the board in the next 4 years?
There's more than two. We're under budget constraints. We've already talked about how our district is funded. Our state allowance is at the lowest level possible in the state of Michigan. It's unfortunate. So funding certainly is an issue, and I think that is tied to advocacy. As board members, we have the responsibility to take the voice of our community up to Lansing, certainly Lansing and Washington, D.C., to talk about what's fair in funding. And we need to go in with data. We need to show them, when you pass this legislation, when you consider this, this is the impact it's going to have on our kids. This is what happens. So I think funding and advocacy is very important. I would also suggest local control. I don't like budget line items. I was really pushing on the classroom and kids resolution in front of the board. It took me 2 months to get that passed at the board table. And that was basically a suggestion to our governor and our legislators to eliminate some of the line item funding and just give it to us and let us decide locally, how are we going to use that money? So I think local control is a big issue.
Thank you. Ms. Horst.
I think one of our most important issues is reassuring our teachers and our school employees that they are valued and respected by the school board. That they feel disrespected and unappreciated is an absolute travesty. As a parent, I want an excellent and engaged teacher in every classroom, and I think of some of the teachers who have come in contact with my students. And I think of Jan Finney, who's a kindergarten teacher at Springfield Plains, who cannot speak about a current or a former student without tears coming to her eyes. And I think about Tommy McGlinnan at the junior high here in this building. I keep waiting for my son Jed to come home and tell me that he showed up in class dressed as Thomas Jefferson or Benjamin Franklin. I mean, that's how passionate our teachers are. And so repairing that relationship and making sure that they get the same sense of appreciation and positive morale from the school board is very important to me. Also, in 15 seconds, I think addressing the idea of competition and how are we as a public school going to compete in the future when we are all looking for resources, we are all looking for students, but we're going to have to be very careful and very thoughtful before we jump into some of these competitive avenues like schools of choice. I'm not sure that's right for Clarkston.
Thank you. Mr. Heyer.
The number one issue that we're facing is student achievement. We must continue to innovate. We must continue to push a culture that values creative thinking, problem solving, entrepreneurialism. We have so many innovative things going on in this school district. Our failure is that we're not very good at communicating about them. We're not very good at telling others about them. In our elementary schools, we have a reading, writing workshop where teachers are actually working with each other to make sure that our students are receiving all of the elements of literacy, and they actually help each other improve their teaching practice. To my knowledge, this goes on in no other districts, and we've had a number of our surrounding districts and districts around the state calling us to find out how we're achieving the results we're achieving, and what's our magic potion to do that. And I'm proud to share what we're doing here in Clarkston that is so effective. In Clarkston, we focus on the whole child. We look at physical, mental, social. We want kids to be safe. We want them to be fed. We want them to be able to focus on their education. That's vitally important. We want to expand programs like advanced placement, international baccalaureate, our integrated math and science program, CSM Tech, our phenomenal career and technical education. And second, I would put our teachers and staff and their needs, our physical plant, our maintenance technology needs in another bucket that absolutely needs to be addressed.
Thank you. Ms. Liebling.
I think the single most important job of the school board is to focus on student achievement. So for me, that is how I guide the majority of my decisions. That's one of the single biggest things that attracts people to want to live in this community. So student achievement, making sure our students are prepared, making sure that they have the ability to attend the best colleges, to go to the career vocational tech schools of their choice, and to really make sure that they are successful. That is my first and foremost goal, and I think that is one of the biggest challenges of the school board. And the second is the budget. We need to have the budget to do those things. We need to have the budget to attract and retain the best teachers, to provide the best tools, and to have the best facilities we can so that education in Clarkston can be what it is and can be the best it can be as a premier district in Oakland County in the state.
Thank you. That concludes the questions. We will now have closing statements in reverse order. And we will, I'm sorry, Mr. Deering, you get to answer this.
I wasn't going to cut you off. I was just going to wait till you were done. I would agree that 2 is very challenging, and although I have not been in the community a long time, I've certainly been on the board or have been extremely involved in some of the intricacies, 2 is a tall order. But if I had to pick 2, and I thought about it as the others were speaking, I think you have to have 1 as being the budget. And the reason is because if you do not have a balanced budget, of course, that is a legal obligation, frankly. If you don't have a balanced budget, I don't care what your goals are. Without money, you can't do it. And so you have to have a budget that will afford some of the luxuries that we all want to talk about. But if you don't have the money, again, you can't do it. So that would be 1. And the second, maybe unpopular, but I think, frankly, communication. I think if you have the money and you have the ability to communicate effectively, you can get a whole lot done. And one of the things that I've surmised from interviewing folks in this process of preparing for this is that communication seems to be lacking, and I think that that's something that I feel like I am frankly an expert in. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that in not to give it a negative connotation to what's been done here on the board, but I think that I do communicate effectively. So budget and communication, I think we get a lot more done.
Thank you. Now we will do the closing statements in reverse order, and we'll start with Ms. Liebling.
First of all, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters again and the PTA Council for hosting this event. I have served on the school board for 5 years, and I believe that I have the skills and experience to help the district achieve at the highest levels. I thoughtfully make decisions that focus on student achievement and financial responsibility, both for short-term and for longer-term. As one of the 7 board members, I understand that decisions I make not only impact the students in the schools, but they also impact the community. I try to look at data to make my decisions, as well as the opinions of others. I stand on my record of focusing on student achievement, fiscal responsibility, maintaining our district assets, and supporting and rewarding our teachers and all of our employees. I believe in transparency in the operation of the school district and accountability to reach these goals by using specific, measurable, and attainable assessments. I'm always open to responding to questions and discussing opinions, so please don't hesitate to contact me. Thank you for listening, and I hope you will cast your vote for me.
Thank you. Mr. Heyer.
This school board has never needed experience more than it needs it now. When I was first elected to the board, it was comprised of very experienced board members. For 5 years now, I have been the most experienced board member, and I've worked continuously to help all board members understand our role, understand where we've come from as a district, and I demand that we make our decisions based on what is best for our kids and our community. I will work tirelessly to return the focus at the board table to student achievement. I will work to return to a culture that values our administrators and our teachers, and one that values ideas, thinking, and innovation. I will continue to represent all 8,000 of our students in the entire community, and in every decision that I make, I will put kids and our community first. Please visit my website at steveheyer.com to learn more about me, my background, and my ideas for the school district, and I'm asking for your vote on November 4th so I can continue to serve you and our community on the Clarkson Community Schools Board of Education.
Thank you, Ms. Horst.
Thank you so much, Clarkston PTA Council and League of Women Voters, for hosting us tonight. Aren't we lucky to live in Clarkston? Clarkston is the envy of most communities in Oakland County. We have a strong sense of identity, both as a community and as a school district. Our schools and classrooms are filled with joy and passion for teaching and learning. But I can't help but contrast the enthusiasm in our schools with the gloomy and somber tone in the boardroom. I think that board leadership has lost sight of the connection between the boardroom and the classroom. A couple of weeks ago at parent-teacher conferences at the middle school, we were given pieces of red thread. It's a symbol in many cultures for building connections, and it reminds me of the emotional and lasting connections that are created through education. This is why I'm here. It's a privilege to sit here tonight before you and ask you to trust me for the next 6 years for your children's future. With your help, I'll carry this red thread back to the boardroom, and I'll bring joy and passion back to the job of serving students and community, our community, as a member of the Clarkston Board of Education. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Egan.
Well, thank you everyone for taking the time out from your busy lives to come and listen to us and facilitating this forum. The board needs to represent the voice of the community, and relationships are very, very important. It's an important relationship between a parent and a child. It's an important relationship between a teacher and a student, and it's a very important relationship between the board and the superintendent. And this is a very important election. It's a very important decision for our community to make. I want to focus on student achievement, and I want to focus on student achievement measures. I'm a teacher. I teach kids. I've been teaching kids for 14 years. I know how important it is not to just teach a child, but they need to learn how to think, how to apply, how to adapt, how to be persistent, how to perform, how to be part of a team. There's more than just rote memorization to teaching a student. That's very important, but those relationships are very important. The board and the superintendent relationship is critical. It's just an important decision right now. So I hope everyone pays attention. I want you to know that I represent the taxpayers, but I'm also going to be the voice for 8,000 kids here in Clarkston who don't get to vote. So if you want more information on me, please visit my blog, ElizabethEgan.net.
Thank you, Mr. Deering.
Well, thank you all for coming out this evening. I appreciate it. What I would like to really say is that my goal is really to serve the community. In my business, I am frankly a servant, whether we like to think it, and the hospital doctors don't exactly like to refer to themselves as servants, but in fact, that's what we all are. And so I think teachers are really the same in that regard. And so I would have a lot of goals. My goals, again, would be the budget certainly would be a big goal. Technology would be a huge goal. Communication is paramount to get any of these goals done. But I think that we have to be able to hear what the voice of the community is, use the board members as a conduit to express that voice in an articulate manner, in a meaningful and professional manner, and get some results, get something done that's based on what the community wants, hold people accountable. I'm all for administrators doing what it is that they need to empower them. We have to hold them accountable as well. And you all have to hold your board members accountable. I have no problem with that whatsoever. So I do ask you for your vote. And I appreciate you again coming out this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our forum. The League of Women Voters would like to thank the PTA Council, the audience, the candidates, and Independence TV for making this forum possible. For further nonpartisan information on these candidates and every candidate for election in November 4, please visit our website and look at our voter guide, lwvoa.org, or go to Vote 411. The voter guide should be in city halls and libraries, and they were delivered last week, so you can pick up a copy there. It has the information from the governor all the way down to the local races. When known, rebroadcast times of this forum will be on the LWVOA website. The League of Women Voters is funded by contributions from concerned businesses and citizens. Our membership is open to men and women over the age of 18. Remember to vote on November 4th, 2014. Democracy is not a spectator sport. Thank you and good night.
Thank you.